The first time I cried watching football, it was Quaresma with the ball at his feet. A few months later, I cried for the last time. So far, Portugal had won the Euros. It was the greatest joy football had ever given me, and it was in great account thanks to him. But what could be easy to forget now is the incredible journey that got him there on that day. He had started his career as the biggest talent in Portugal's biggest academy, outshining even Cristiano Ronaldo, but Quaresma is, in my opinion, football's greatest enigma. At first, he didn't even like football, but he was clearly born to play it. He struggled with great coaches and great teams, but he was a big game player anywhere else. He failed repeatedly, yet he always came back. Coaches seemed to think the worst of him, yet the fans always fell in love at first sight. While Ronaldo won Ballon d'Ors, he was winning Bidon d'Oros, and still, in the end, without him, CR7 might have never won the biggest trophy of his career. They were made for each other, the perfect balance of engineering and art. I can't lie to you, he is my favorite player of all time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I mean that like never before. Let's go. As gifted as Quaresma was, he was highly temperamental. He seemed to have a knack for getting on the manager's nerves, and the media loved this. Quaresma was eternally portrayed as a loose cannon, but looking back at his childhood and hearing him speak about it, as timid as he is, you can see why by the age of 19 he had so much anger built up inside him. He was the son of a Romani father and an Angolan mother, two of the most segregated ethnicities in Portugal. He was born in Bairro Casal Ventoso, a ghetto known as the Supermercado da Droga, and at 4 years of age, his parents divorced. Years went by before he saw his father again. As Quaresma has said, I could see it in the eyes of everyone else. They looked at me strange. If anything happened, it was always the Romani boy's fault. One day at school, a jacket went missing. They all blamed me, the kids, the teachers, the parents. Then the jacket showed up. The kid had just left it somewhere. Not a single person apologized to me. I was worthless. Quaresma always went a step further to go against the stereotypes locals associated with him. It was the only chance he had. He never smoked a cigarette, he never drank a drop of liquor, he never touched any drugs. But it was never enough. No matter how hard he tried growing up, he was always seen as a problem, always treated as lesser than others, and eventually that led to trust issues, a hard time dealing with authority, and problems with anger management. It was a product of the environment he tried so hard to please, but thankfully, he found a place to let go of some of that anger. What many people don't know is that Quaresma's grandpa was a first division footballer, a goal-scoring defender who played 13 years for Belenenses and the Portuguese national team, who historically took his club to second and third place finishes in the league, leading them to a victorious Intertoto Cup run and eventually the UEFA Cup, which only ended through a single goal defeat to Johan Cruyff's Barcelona. Still, growing up, Quaresma wasn't as crazy about football as he would go on to become. He only started playing because his brother, who wanted to become a goalkeeper, needed someone to train him. In fact, at 8 years of age, Quaresma actually wanted to play hockey, mostly because of his friends, and he only began playing for Sporting because his brother was there and his mom insisted she wouldn't drive them to two different places. So, with the alternative being staying at home and doing nothing, Quaresma started playing football instead. However, he impressed himself, instantly becoming one of the top players in his team, being bumped up to play with the older kids, and he has even admitted that at the time he asked himself, how come I don't like football if it's clear I was born to play it? And I know everyone wants to know this, so here it goes. Yes, he was already pulling off trivelas at that age. He actually insists that he never tried to do them to stand out or anything like that. Apparently when he was younger, his feet were a bit crooked. They pointed inwards and so he struggled to arch them back enough to strike the ball normally, and since his family didn't have enough money to send him to a doctor, he was instead forced to adapt and began using the outside of the foot. The thing is, right from the start, coaches didn't like this for some reason, and at Sporting, he was constantly told to stop doing it. At one point, he scored a trivela goal in training and he was sent home early, with the coach telling him, I don't want to see you score like that ever again, which is a bit odd to say the least. By the age of 16, Quaresma's career took off, first being called up to the under-16 Euros, being the standout player of the tournament, scoring to tie the final against the Czech Republic, and then scoring the golden goal only 1 minute into extra time to win the match and hand the trophy to Portugal. This impressive debut earned him his first professional contract at Sporting, and 1 year later he was already being bumped up to the main squad, instantly imposing himself with a goal and a hat-trick of assists in his first start, playing 36 matches, already with a knack for solving tough games, even being referred to as the greatest dribbler in the world as Sporting hit their first domestic double in 20 years. However, it seemed the best was yet to come. As much as Quaresma had risen through the ranks as undoubtedly the most impressive talent in the Sporting Academy, there was one other boy who had made some serious waves. In fact, the two had grown to be pretty close. His name was Cristiano Ronaldo. With qualification to the Champions League, Quaresma already settled, Ronaldo getting a brace in his first start and Jardel coming off of a 55-goal season, it seemed Sporting were set to shock all of Europe, but unfortunately, it was right then and there that Jardel succumbed to his drug abuse, that Sporting fell into a financial rock bottom that lasted decades, and though watching the two boys together was one of the coolest things to happen to the Portuguese league, as the commentator said the first time they started together, this is why these kinds of talents don't stay in Portugal for very long. I have to say, hearing that piece of commentary now sends chills down my spine. Back then, Quaresma and Cris, as he likes to call him, were like blood in the water to the big sharks of European football, and as predicted, by the end of the season they were both gone, one to Manchester, one to Barcelona. What no one could have guessed was just how massively different their paths would have been, with the only thing keeping them together being their brotherhood that still lasts to this day. Okay, so one quick thing. While I was working on this video, I found out about one piece of information that really blew my mind. Hear me out. A man named Robert Fernandez, who has worked as a sporting director for both Valencia and Barcelona, has told the press that back then he was involved in the transfer discussions for both players, as Valencia was trying to get either of them, and he repeatedly heard the Barcelona representatives claim that they would love to get Ronaldo if it weren't for the fact that Quaresma was available. Not only did one of the biggest clubs in the world confirm the claims that at the start Quaresma was considered to be the most promising talent of the two, it also tells us that if it weren't for Quaresma, Ronaldo could have been a Blaugrana, playing besides Ronaldinho and Messi. That's insane. That's actually like absolutely wild, but I guess let's get back to the video. While Ronaldo instantly became a fan favorite and the golden boy of Sir Alex, Quaresma arrived at Barcelona in complete chaos, being picked by the president of the club before the arrival of new coach Frank Rijkaard, putting them both at odds from the start, which only worsened when Ronaldinho was brought in, completely overshadowing the signing of Quaresma, who would already have a tough time with Overmars and Luis Enrique ahead of him in the pecking order. Rijkaard tried to put him through a tactical crash course, but Quaresma insisted he had been promised a free roll on the pitch and felt the manager's teachings were closer to being patronizing than helpful, sending them into a clash that ended with Quaresma refusing to play for Barcelona and telling the press, "If Rijkaard stays, I won't return. We do not understand each other. This has nothing to do with my teammates. It's between me and him." It would all eventually culminate in Quaresma being used as a trading chip in a deal to get Deco to Barcelona, but a decade later, he would admit he regretted his actions, saying, "I couldn't wait for the right moment. People around me put ideas in my head, convinced me I'd already won it all. I only had yes men when I needed someone to call me out and set me straight." Regardless, at Porto he became my idol. Hurt after Sporting hesitated to get him back to the club, he arrived at a team that, though depleted of most of its stars, were still by right the champions of Europe. Quaresma served as a token of hope, being named the league's player of the year and exciting everyone with his every touch of the ball, as the fans dealt with the loss of most of their star players, the loss of Mourinho, and the struggle of replacing him, hiring 3 coaches in a single season. It was a dark time, but the hope brought on by Quaresma soon materialized as he was once again the league's best player on his second season, this time inspiring the club to a domestic double. However, this success only made it hurt 10 times more when, having already missed the Euro 2004 through injury, Quaresma was not called up to the World Cup, something that sent the entire country into protest but to no avail. Thankfully, following the fiery exit of Coadrians, Quaresma was introduced to his new coach Jesualdo Ferreira, a man who understood him like very few, even claiming, "I will never ask Quaresma to change, otherwise he will become average. This way, he plays like the genius he really is." This approach led Quaresma to play his best football to date, leading Porto to 3 consecutive league titles and establishing himself as one of the club's all-time greats, even being called back up to the Portuguese national team and scoring the best goal of his career right before the Euro 2008, his first international tournament. This entire sequence of events led many clubs to make a run for his signing once again, and in the end, it was Mourinho who managed to bring him to Milan, which was very unfortunate. You see, Mourinho is not exactly known for being a comprehensive manager, let alone one that allows his players to have any freedom, and so he seemed desperate to tame the Mustang, saying, "If he doesn't learn, then he doesn't play. It's simple. They say he likes to kick the ball with the outside of his foot, but in a few months, you'll see a different Quaresma." The Trivela ended up being a symbol for what happened at Milan. The same way Benitez tried to stop Modric from pulling the same stunt at Madrid, Mourinho also seemed to think that the Trivela was just a crutch lazy players used to justify their one-footedness. But in reality, Quaresma was in many ways a player of another time. Nobody asked Maradona to use his weak foot because he didn't need to, but in the modern game, that made Quaresma an outcast. In an era of stats and percentages, Quaresma didn't play by the textbook, and that killed him at the eyes of Mourinho. After 6 months, he was off to Chelsea on loan. As he joined Ronaldo's rivals, the contrast of their careers was highlighted for the first time. His old friend had just been handed the Ballon d'Or, while Quaresma, well, as much as it may sound like a joke, he was handed the Bidon d'Oro for the most disappointing player in Italy. Arriving under the care of his former coach Scolari, there was hope at Chelsea, but after 1 week, unbelievably Scolari was sacked and Gus Hiddink made a mockery of Quaresma, giving him what seemed like a handful of minutes. Once the loan ended, Inter failed to sell him, and for a whole year, it was as if Quaresma had gone missing. Once they won the treble, with Quaresma not even making the bench, some even mocked him for his over-the-top celebration. It had been a decade of attempts of getting Quaresma in the mindset needed to shine for a major team, and despite being a cult hero for football fans, nothing had come off of it. So in what seemed like Quaresma accepting that he would become a player only the streets would remember, he joined Besiktas, being welcomed like a king, with thousands of fans flooding the streets, and becoming a legend there as well, embodying the spirit of the club, loving the fans as much as they loved him. He made history right on his first season, scoring the opener and being the man of the match as Besiktas won the final of the Turkish Cup. However, the following season, everything escalated as Portuguese coach Carlos Carvalhal subbed him off at half-time in a match against Atletico, with Quaresma going off on him, claiming the only reason he was at the club was because he himself had convinced the board to bring him on, allegedly even throwing a water bottle at the coach. For the third time in 8 years, Quaresma had gotten on the wrong side of his coach, and though strangely the board sided with him, sending Carvalhal away from the club, by summer they too had their problems with Quaresma after he refused to take a pay cut and was arrested for assaulting a police officer as he chased after a man who had just stolen his mom's purse, leading them to terminate his contract. This steered him to impulsively signing for Al Ahly in Dubai after half a year without a club, which many considered as confirmation that he had indeed given up on his career at the age of 29. But strangely, he failed so hard there that after a few months they would terminate his contract as well. But in reality, this prompted one of the most impressive comebacks ever seen, with nowhere to go after another 9 months without a club, as everyone seemed to have forgotten who he was, and he seemed bound to be just another Mario Balotelli churning away his last good years in some second-tier club. Porto took him under their wing, welcoming him to his first training session with 10,000 fans waiting, leading him to say later in the year, "If I have to die for this club, I would gladly die with no problem." Once again, Quaresma arrived in the process of a rebuild, with Porto only recently losing James, Hulk and Falcao, and just as before, as Porto went trophyless, it was Quaresma who helped keep the fans sane. This time around, proving to have finally matured into a much more reliable player, notably being exceptional at the international stage in both seasons, scoring against Eintracht, Sevilla and Napoli in the first season, and then putting 2 past Neuer in just 10 minutes as Porto went on to beat Bayern 3-1. Unfortunately, coach Lopetegui was A strange character, let's put it like that, and after insisting on playing a much inferior Cristiano Ronaldo ahead of him, he eventually forced Quaresma out of the club, with the man himself claiming, "I still don't know why he got rid of me." Regardless, everyone else could see the massive improvement of his game, and so not only did Besiktas bring him back, so did Fernando Santos, who called him up to the national team for the first time in years. So in 2016 he not only finally managed to lead Besiktas to the Turkish Super League title after 7 years, but he also combined with Ronaldo for 5 goals in a 7-0 demolition of Estonia, earning himself a place in the Euros after 8 years without a call-up. In a weak Portuguese side that appeared completely hopeless at first, Quaresma was a super sub, becoming an unlikely hero alongside Ronaldo, assisting as he scored the goal that sent them to the final stage, then scoring the winning goal in the last 16 off of a rebound from Ronaldo, then scoring the decisive penalty in the quarters, and even coming on for the man himself as Ronaldo dropped down injured in the final. 13 years since both had said their goodbyes at Sporting, this seemed almost like a prophecy, and believe me, I shook to my car when Quaresma nearly pulled off a bicycle kick goal in extra time, but in the end, regardless of where the goal came from, seeing him and Ronaldo hugging each other in absolute euphoria will forever be one of my most cherished moments in football. No matter how much more turbulent Quaresma's journey had been, eventually they both arrived at the same spot, two friends sharing the greatest moment of their careers, a testimony as to why you should never give up. And that continued to be his motto ever since, always putting his all into every match with Besiktas, leading them to another title before being called up for his first ever World Cup at the age of 34 and still managing to score arguably the most beautiful game of the tournament, you guessed it, a Trivela. 2 more moves to Kasimpasa and Vitória de Guimarães followed, with the 38-year-old being now a free agent. If it depended on me, I know where he would end his career, but I guess we'll see.